Now, what I'm about to say may not necessarily be 100% the truth, and it may not even be reasonable, um, but I think it is, at least in my opinion, a working theory that you can apply to human society as a whole, or more specifically, modern Western society. And my theory is essentially that most, if not almost all adults, are not actually independent or responsible. Or, if you want to phrase it a little nicer, most people are not as independent or responsible as the culture sells them out to be. Right? Think about it, right? What is independence? In essence, what is independence? For, most people, it's being able to make your own decisions, right? Being able to, control your own finances, right? Control your own property, control where you live, right? What you do with where you live, aka your property, so on and so forth, right? And really, at the end of the day, you could also just boil it down to being able to support yourself, right? Without relying on other people as much. And really, the epitome of this is essentially moving out of your parents' house, right? Because that's what your parents are when you're a kid, when you're growing up, right? They support you, right? They ensure all your basic needs are met. They pretty much, provide everything that you'd probably want or require to, become a functioning member of society, as they say, right? Right, food, water, shelter, transportation, education, emotional stability, money, that kind of thing. And obviously, as you're growing up as well, you're taught, hey, you should start being responsible for your own life, right? You should, start doing things like getting a job, doing chores around the house, figuring out what you want to study in, college or university, you know, doing your own laundry, stuff like that. It's like, because, hey, you're going to move out eventually. You're going to be your own, your own adult, your own person. You're going to be independent. So you got to figure out how to do it without being dependent on us, right? That's the common pitch. Now think about this carefully. Who else is also responsible for your basic needs, right? For food, water, shelter, right? And for stuff like transportation, education, emotional stability, so on and so forth. And who also tells you, like, hey, you should be responsible, right? The government, the state. I mean, yes, companies supply these things, but ultimately they answer to the government. The government is also responsible for making the laws to regulate these industries and services, right? And at the same time, they also are responsible for the money, right? The currency, and heavily influence the market, which your paycheck is dependent upon. Right? It's kind of like when you were a kid, depending on what kind of parents you had, your parents would give you an allowance for doing stuff like mopping the floor or taking out the trash or walking the dog or whatever. And ultimately, that money, that allowance, right, the control of it rested in your parents' hands. Or at least your parents had a very strong influence over said allowance, right? They were kind of the source of it. I mean, yeah, you could use your allowance to buy whatever you want. You could buy like 3 sodas or some shit. But again, your folks, right? It came from them, and they could, intervene at any point, be like, hey, you don't get enough allowance today because you didn't do this and this, or hey, yeah, we're gonna, we're gonna cut off your allowance because you're being a little shit. Well, sounds like the economy, right? Sounds like working. Sounds like, you know, what happens when the market gets all fucked and the government bails out the corporations, the big banks that it likes, and leaves little people to pick up the pieces after. Leave the taxpayer to foot the bill, so to speak. Right? Like, think about it. You go to work to earn money to be able to pay for the services that the government is supplying you that you are also fully dependent on and that you cannot live without. Well, depends on how, prepared you are, how self-sufficient you are, but for most people they couldn't live without it. Right? Isn't that kind of like allowance, almost like tokens? Because at the end of the day, the government is the one printing the money. They're the ones with the ability to devalue or upscale the value of said currency, right? Like, during COVID, for instance, the government, they printed a lot more dollars than they probably should have, and now inflation's rising. Well, guess what? They influenced the fact that your dollar now buys you less. So in essence, it's like you can do less with your allowance than before, which, depending on how you behave, right? Parents can also do that. Right? Parents can be like, yeah, we're not giving you as much money this time. So now you can buy less with the same allowance from before. Well, not the same, but you get the idea, right? And at the same time, the government is in bed with a lot of the stock market, right? Insider trading, stuff like that, and the big corporations who, they can kind of change things on a whim. Right? Elon Musk sends out a tweet and, this stock goes up, or Jeff Bezos, does this and this stock plummets, stuff like that. Right? Ultimately, the value of your money, or shall I say the value of your allowance, it can be crushed by the feds, right? If the government makes a mistake and next thing you know you're in the Great Depression, well, sorry pal, we can't give you our allowance today, so you're gonna have to figure it out, right? And then the last part is the responsibility aspect, right? You're told to be personally responsible, right? You have to be responsible for your own health, your own food, your own transportation, right? That's why people get driver's licenses, blah blah blah. Okay, well, apparently part of being an adult in a functioning society is to make sure that people uphold the rules of the society and that what has been promised is kept, right? You, as a citizen, as a voter, you are supposed to ensure that your leaders are kept in check and their worst tendencies are trimmed, again, either by voting them out or by pressuring, institutions of law, etc. Okay, so why is Donald Trump able to essentially wage a forever war in Iran right now, and how come most of the people in the Epstein files have not been prosecuted at all, if at all? And how the Epstein files, of which they only released a very small percentage, were magically deleted only a little while ago. Is it not the job of the people to perhaps say, hey, we did not agree to this. We don't like this. We're supposed to keep you in line. Get the fuck out of office. Oh, guess what? That didn't happen. Nope. Same way they're building data centers, and most people are just going about their business like, yeah, that's fine. Or, they complain on Instagram, they complain on YouTube, right? They type up some angry comment, we gotta resist, and then nothing happens. Nothing changes. I understand that, yes, it is hard for people to actually do anything, to actually act, especially these days. I'm just making a point here. You have a personal responsibility, but as an adult, in a democracy, or what is supposed to be a democracy, you are supposed to have a civic responsibility as well, a duty to your fellow man, to yourself, and to future generations to ensure that your nation remains on a relatively stable trajectory and doesn't fall into tyranny or outright just collapse. Right? And finally, right, magical beliefs. Right? Parents, well, not parents, but kids, right? They have a lot of magical beliefs when they're young. One of the primary ones being Santa Claus. You're like, oh, if I write to Santa, I'm gonna get gifts under the tree. Oh, if I vote for this candidate, it'll change the trajectory of the nation. We'll be great again. Don't those two sound the same? Have you really seen any actual change happen? Right? For instance, everybody's all like, oh, climate change, climate change, climate change. Okay. It doesn't really look like the renewable energy sector is kicked off very much. One of those would be nuclear. It's not the most renewable because the fuel is allegedly limited, but it's certainly a lot more efficient and a lot less polluting than, say, I don't know, coal and gas, right? Right. And I mean, at the same time, you have Starlink launching like a bajillion satellites into the atmosphere, and these satellites are largely made out of aluminum. When the satellites burn up, it creates aluminum oxide. The aluminum oxide, hey, guess what that does? Damages the ozone layer, which is not good for us. It's like, why does that not concern you? That'll affect climate change. Right? I mean, yeah, well, we can harp about it all we want, but no one's actually going to do shit. And it's like, the very same people that you voted for are letting this happen. Like the Starlink satellite example is just one of them, but they're letting this happen. What, you think if you vote in a Democrat is going to change things? Like, come on, have you not looked at the last, like 4 to 6 years, nothing has changed. I mean, in essence, you could almost say nothing has really ever changed since, well, I don't know, World War II. I'm not sure. I'm not very well read in American history. What I'm really trying to say here is that ultimately, right, ultimately, as an adult, you are not as independent as you think. You are not as responsible as you think. And you still hold a lot of magical fucking beliefs that we would attribute to children. All you really did was switch one pair of parents for another. That's really it. It's like, oh, I'm independent. No, 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 no. You are independent from your parents, from your family. What you are not independent from is the various systems, ultimately answering to the state, that you need to survive and that you cannot function without. You're not an adult. You're, in essence, a glorified child. And just because you're personally responsible for yourself does not mean that magically you cannot forget that you are also responsible not only to future generations, but also to everybody around you who you share this nation with. To maybe make sure the nation doesn't get so fucked that there's no real future. I'm just saying. Again, this was a very horrible rant. I did not really make the most coherent points. I don't exactly know what I'm talking about. This is just the best I could come up with on the spot. I'm sure, if I did a little more research, tried a little bit more to um, make an actual script, I probably could have sounded smarter. But that's what you get. I don't know. Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I at least reasonable? What do you think? And if you have any thoughts of your own to offer, then please go ahead and offer them.